If you've ever experienced any type of dopamine, you're gonna wanna watch this video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm gonna do a book review of Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke. Let's get into it. Anna Lemke is a psychiatrist and a professor, a researcher, and this is an incredible book that I think pertains to all of us. It's a book about pleasure, it's a book about pain, but most importantly, it's a book about finding the balance between the two. My plan for this video is to share all the major takeaways and hopefully convince you to read it. The first major takeaway that I'm going to talk about is the environment. Anna Lemke paints a picture of the environment that we currently live in, and she does so with a powerful metaphor that absolutely stuck with me, and that is, we are all cacti living in a rainforest. Let that one sink in. We are all cacti living in a rainforest. What does that mean? Well, humans evolved because of scarcity. Think back to the hunter and gatherer days when meals were not necessarily guaranteed and humans were constantly on the move. That is a sharp contrast to how we live today, which is in a world of abundance and overstimulation. The issue here is that our brains were not built for this type of environment and they have not evolved for this type of environment. What's really crazy that Anna Lemke states is that any behavior that leads to dopamine can be exploited. Think about shopping, think about social media, think about food, think about seeking validation. All of these things result in an increase in dopamine and they can therefore be exploited. A lot of the organizations behind creating the food that we love, behind social media and all of these things are exploiting our behaviors and our craving for dopamine to get us to keep coming back for more. But here's the kicker. Because of this overabundance and overstimulation, we're left feeling impoverished in a world of plenty. Cactus in the rainforest. We have more access, more comfort, more options than ever before, yet we still feel like we don't have enough. There's a lack, there's a dissatisfaction. I'm willing to bet that any of you that are watching this video have felt this at some point. I know I've felt it myself. A last point that I'll bring up related to this theme of the environment that we're currently living in, which sets the tone for this entire book, is that 70% of world deaths are attributable to modifiable behavior risk factors. Things like smoking, things like physical inactivity, and things like diets. Now that we've set the stage, let's move on to the second major takeaway. The second major theme is the pleasure-pain balance. So Anna Lemke creates this mental image for us to be able to understand it better. And it's like a balance or a seesaw. So imagine my elbow is the pleasure side and imagine my hand is the pain side. Anytime you feel a spike in dopamine and you tip towards the pleasure side, your pain, whatever you're going to be experiencing after the fact, is what eventually you'll need to experience to find that balance again, and vice versa. If your scale is tipped to the pain side, eventually you'll start to feel good and that balance will reset. This is important to understand because anytime you tip the scale, it needs to offset. And anytime you tip it to one side and you keep tipping it to that side over and over again, then eventually you get used to that and you need more to find that balance again. In an age of abundance and overstimulation and plenty, it's important to know because our behaviors are being exploited and getting us to come back to tip and find those cheap dopamine hits. But that always comes with the cost. And we're going to experience some type of dissatisfaction as our balance resets. Pleasure and pain are actually processed in the same part of our brain. So it's important to understand this image so that we can learn better how to balance the two. It's not to say that one is better than the other. We will inevitably experience both, but how can we ensure that our scale is not overused in one direction? These next two major themes are some of my favorite from the book. So the third takeaway is about this idea of how we escape the world and how it might be beneficial to instead turn towards it. Turn towards the pain and the discomfort that we're running away from. Naturally, our instinct as humans is to escape that discomfort or to ensure that we're safe. It's understandable, but we can use this as a tool. And if we instead turn to that fear, turn to that pain, we can actually reset our balance. And therefore that would help us to rebuild our sensitivity to pleasure. When I learned that we have the ability to reset this, then I began thinking of my own behaviors and what I could do to reset that. What could I turn to ensure that I wasn't running away from something and instead facing what I needed to face? My first idea that came to my mind and that I actually did in the middle of reading this book is I decided to delete my social media, Instagram and X, off of my phone for the first time ever. I've been using social media for half my life. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I downloaded Facebook when I was 17 and then Instagram and then Twitter shortly afterwards. And I've never taken a break, ever. I never felt like I abused social media. And within the last 5 years, I've also been very intentional about limiting my use to about 30 minutes per day. I was happy with that, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't still seeking that validation, that I wasn't still seeking those likes and those comments and those little cheap dopamine hits. And so I thought it was fair after reading this book that I could at least test it out to see how I might feel and where it might lead me. And so I will check back in about a month or so after I have gone without social media. It's been about 3 or 4 days, so not long, but I will make a video about my experience with it and hopefully it will inspire you. The last point I'll bring up about this topic is that avoiding pain doesn't eliminate it. It often amplifies it later. So this is why it's important to face it now rather than just ignore it. A fourth major takeaway is about honesty. And I absolutely loved that she included this in the book because I've never really spent so much time thinking about honesty. When you think about honesty, you think about it as kind of like a core value. But instead of thinking about it in a moral standpoint, Anna Lemke talks about it from a neurological and relational standpoint, which I loved. What do I mean by that? Well, Anna Lemke argues that honesty enhances self-awareness, it breaks denial loops, and it creates real accountability. All of these things are super important when it comes to trying to break these addictions or trying to break these connections that we have to cheap dopamine. So in a way, I was viewing honesty as a tool. If you can be more honest with yourself, then you can open up all these doors and affect real change. Additionally, it helps to strengthen your relationships. There's less shame and there's more deep connection. It also supports delay of gratification, which for me is super important. It's all about discipline and thinking of your future self. Remember this, addiction thrives in secrecy. Recovery thrives in truth. Think about groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. Honesty is an incredibly important component of that journey. If people weren't being honest with themselves or with others, they're never going to achieve the change that they need to internally. The second I read more about honesty, I thought about my own values and I wondered why I hadn't included honesty in my list, which I have written down in my phone. The second I started reading this chapter and thinking about how I try to be honest in my own life and how it's helped me in the past, I added it to my core values immediately. So I'm proud that that's on there now. And lastly, the overall takeaway that you have when you finish reading this book is a sense of a warning. This book is not trying to argue that we're broken as people or that we're doomed, because we do live in an age of abundance and plenty and overstimulation, and that we're cacti in a rainforest. She's simply stating and bringing awareness to the fact that we're overstimulated. And this could be an explanation for why we feel the way that we do whenever we use things like social media or we go shopping or we eat too much food and indulge. The problem isn't pleasure itself. It's okay to feel pleasure. The problem is frequency, the intensity, the availability, the lack of accountability, not giving yourself time or space to recover. All of these things are the issue. And by understanding that, we can address those things to ensure that we reset our balance. This book was incredibly inspiring for me and felt very necessary to read, especially because it pertains to all of us and is something that we all experience. I would recommend it to literally anybody that can read and who's interested in examining and doing an audit of their life and how they seek out dopamine, or to maybe reflect and think about what they may be running away from. If you're like me, you like to chase your fears, you like to face discomfort, and this is one opportunity to do so. Thanks for sticking around. Feel free to check out one of these other book reviews. I will make a video about my experience with deleting social media in a little while, so stick around for that as well. Feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you in next week's video. Thanks.